Alex had always been captivated by the view through his drone's lens. Flying it over majestic landscapes gave him a sense of freedom and discovery that few other things could match. But nothing he had seen before prepared him for the scene that unfolded on that crisp Appalachian morning. As his drone glided over the rugged peaks, Alex spotted something that made his breath catch. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The camera feed displayed an unusual glimmer in the snow, a geometric, unnatural pattern that stood out starkly against the wild expanse of the Appalachian Mountains. His fingers tightened on the controls, guiding the drone closer. What could it be? Who or what could have left it there? Questions swirled in his mind, but he knew one thing for sure: he had to investigate. Little did he know that his decision to hike into the unknown would unravel a chain of events that would change his life forever. Alex wasn't just another thrill seeker with a drone. He was a wildlife videographer on a mission to document the elusive red wolf in its natural habitat. That day, he had planned to capture footage of these endangered creatures from above, hoping for a glimpse of the majestic predators navigating the snowy wilderness. But fate had a different plan for him. His drone hovered above the mysterious area while he contemplated his next move. It wasn't long before he decided to make the trek. After all, the footage couldn't tell him everything he needed to see it with his own eyes. Grabbing his backpack, he began the climb, unaware that his casual decision would lead him into the heart of a mystery far greater than he could imagine. The hike started easily enough. The crisp winter air invigorated him, and the trail, though rugged, offered breathtaking views. As the hours passed, however, the mountain's unrelenting ascent began to take its toll. Alex cursed himself for not bringing water or food. He had assumed the trek would be a short one, a quick detour before continuing his drone scouting. Hunger clawed at his stomach, and thirst turned his throat dry. He stooped to scoop a handful of snow, letting it melt in his mouth. Eventually, he reached the point where the mysterious shapes had been visible through his drone. He scanned the area with mounting anticipation, but his heart sank when he couldn't spot the objects. Had he miscalculated? His drone's battery had died shortly after capturing the strange images, crashing somewhere nearby. Now he had nothing but his memory to guide him. As he scanned the landscape, his eyes locked onto his downed drone. It was wedged precariously between two rocks on the edge of a steep cliff. Alex hesitated. The drop was dizzying, and one misstep could send him plummeting into the void. Still, the drone held the key to solving the mystery. Steeling himself, Alex made his way to the cliff's edge. Every movement was deliberate. He crouched low, testing each foothold before shifting his weight. The jagged rock face seemed to mock him with its unforgiving angles, but he pressed on. When his foot slipped on a loose stone, his heart leaped into his throat. Clinging to a protruding rock for balance, he fought the urge to look down. He couldn't afford fear, not now. With a deep breath, he pushed forward. Finally, he reached it. Relief washed over him as he pried the drone free from its rocky prison, but the climb back up proved far more grueling. The drone, though small, felt like a lead weight, throwing off his balance. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold, and his arms ached from gripping the sharp rocks. He paused several times to catch his breath, the thought of the mysterious objects propelling him forward. Whatever was hidden in this remote wilderness, he had to uncover it. When Alex finally pulled himself onto solid ground, he collapsed, gasping for air. His body screamed for rest, but his curiosity refused to let him stay idle. He dusted off his drone and powered it up, hoping the crash hadn't damaged its footage. To his relief, the memory card was intact. But as he reviewed the last recorded images, a sense of foreboding crept over him. The objects were still there, dark shapes partially obscured by snow and tarps. Their angular forms were unmistakably human-made, yet entirely out of place in this untouched wilderness. Gathering his strength, Alex set off toward the shapes. Each step brought new details into focus. The objects were crates, large, industrial-looking containers, arranged as if someone had deliberately hidden them. He crouched beside the nearest one, brushing away the snow with gloved hands. The crate bore no markings, no labels, only reinforced steel walls and a heavy lock. A sudden noise sent Alex diving behind a boulder. His pulse quickened as two men appeared, trudging through the snow toward the crates. They were burly, dressed in heavy jackets and carrying what looked like crowbars. Alex held his breath, peering at them from his hiding spot. They worked quickly, opening one of the crates and inspecting its contents. Though Alex couldn't see what was inside, their furtive glances and hurried movements spoke volumes. Whatever they were doing, they didn't want to be caught. Minutes felt like hours as Alex watched the men finish their inspection and leave. Once the crunch of their boots faded, Alex emerged from his hiding spot, his mind racing. He crept toward the opened crate, his heart pounding. Whatever was inside had to be important enough to warrant secrecy and brute force. As he lifted the lid, a wave of cold air and an eerie silence greeted him. Inside were cages, and within them, animals rare, endangered creatures like red wolves, their eyes wide with fear. Alex's stomach turned. These animals were meant to be roaming free in the wild, not trapped in steel prisons. He counted several more crates, all locked but undoubtedly holding similar contents. Rage bubbled within him. Someone was smuggling these animals, ripping them from their natural habitats for who knows what purpose. He had to act, but how? The men could return at any moment, and Alex had no way to contact anyone in this remote location. Suddenly, the sound of engines shattered the silence. Alex barely had time to hide before the men returned, this time with more equipment. He watched helplessly as they began loading the crates onto a sled. His mind raced. If he didn't do something now, the animals would disappear, and their captors would escape justice. As the men worked, Alex noticed something. A crate near the edge of the slope was wobbling precariously. It had been poorly secured, likely in their rush to load everything quickly. An idea sparked in Alex's mind. It was risky, but it was the only chance he had to delay them. Carefully, Alex crept closer to the unsteady crate, using the natural cover of rocks and trees. The men were distracted, talking in low voices as they moved the other crates. Inch by inch, Alex closed the gap. When he was finally within reach, he braced himself and gave the crate a hard shove. The heavy container tipped over the edge, tumbling down the slope with a deafening crash. The sound reverberated through the mountains, startling the men. They shouted in confusion, scrambling toward the noise. Alex seized the moment of chaos to slip away, his heart pounding as he retreated to a safer vantage point. The men cursed loudly, shining flashlights into the distance. One of them barked orders into a walkie-talkie, and Alex's stomach sank. Reinforcements could be on their way. He needed to act fast. From his hiding spot, Alex pulled out his drone. It had survived the crash but was running low on battery. Still, it was his only tool for gathering evidence. He powered it on, sending it into the air as quietly as possible. The drone's camera captured everything: the crates, the men, and even the frightened animals peeking out from behind the bars. Alex silently prayed the footage would be enough to alert authorities. As the drone hovered overhead, one of the men noticed the faint buzzing sound. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, pointing toward the sky. Alex's pulse spiked as the man grabbed a rifle from their truck and took aim. Before the man could fire, Alex quickly maneuvered the drone higher, out of range. The shot rang out, echoing through the mountains, but missed. The men scrambled to find the source of the drone's operator, their voices growing more frantic. Realizing his cover was blown, Alex decided to lead them away from the animals. He sprinted through the trees, deliberately snapping branches and making noise to draw their attention. The men took the bait, abandoning their search for the drone and chasing after him instead. Adrenaline coursed through Alex's veins as he zigzagged through the forest. The uneven terrain worked to his advantage. He knew the area better than they did. Finally, Alex found a narrow crevice between two large boulders and squeezed inside. He held his breath, listening as the men thundered past, their flashlights sweeping the area. When their voices faded into the distance, Alex allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. Then he activated the emergency satellite beacon in his backpack. It was a long shot, but if anyone was monitoring, they might send help. As the minutes dragged on, Alex's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if the men found him? What if the authorities didn't arrive in time? The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he refused to give up. Just as doubt began to creep in, a distant sound broke the silence. Helicopters. The low, rhythmic thrum grew louder, and Alex's heart leaped with hope. He emerged cautiously from his hiding spot, waving his arms to signal the approaching aircraft. The helicopters hovered overhead, their searchlights sweeping the area. Moments later, a team of wildlife officers and law enforcement descended on the scene. Alex ran toward them, explaining everything in hurried breaths. He showed them the drone footage, his words tumbling over each other in his urgency to convey the gravity of the situation. The officers moved quickly, surrounding the area and apprehending the men before they could flee. The crates were opened, revealing the frightened animals inside. Alex watched as veterinarians and wildlife specialists carefully assessed each creature, their expressions a mix of anger and determination. One of the officers approached Alex, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You did a brave thing here," he said. "These animals owe you their lives." Alex nodded, too overwhelmed to respond. The relief of knowing the animals were safe was almost too much to bear. He sank to the ground, his legs trembling as the weight of the ordeal finally hit him. In the days that followed, Alex's story made headlines. News outlets praised him as a hero, and conservation organizations reached out to thank him for his actions. The footage from his drone became a powerful tool in raising awareness about wildlife trafficking, shining a spotlight on the darker side of human greed. But for Alex, the true reward was knowing he had made a difference. The red wolves, once destined for a grim fate, were now on their way to rehabilitation and eventual release back into the wild. He had started his journey as a curious adventurer, but he emerged from it as a passionate advocate for conservation. Sitting in his small apartment weeks later, Alex watched the news coverage of the rescued animals. A smile tugged at his lips as he saw one of the red wolves he had helped save. It was a reminder of the power of taking action, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As he powered up his drone for another flight, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mountains still held countless mysteries, but he was ready to face them head-on. After all, the world was full of wonders waiting to be discovered and protected.